everybody. Thank you for inviting me to come here and talk to you today about some of the work that we've been doing at QUT with Appian. You'd think on the basis of that video that we're a really cutting-edge university and we're highly technological, and you'd be thinking that our back-end and back-office processes were just as good. No. I joined the university about 18 months ago and started on a project that was called eForms and Workflow. That might give you an idea that what they were really looking at trying to do at the time was digitize some existing forms and workflows to try and gain some value. Some of the issues that they were suffering at the time, and this is not unusual for organizations that have grown up through acquisition. I mean, the number of schools that got added over a number of years, it's not atypical to have we've got over 700 different applications at the university. We've got some very repetitive processes. There were lots of error and rework in that. We had over 1,000 manual paper forms at the university for student processes, research processes, and finance and HR. There were lots of compliance issues. Very early on, we engaged with our risk and compliance team, and they basically had no clue whether we were being compliant with our business processes because it was all paper-based. So there's a very limited audit trail. There was an awful lot of duplication. The right hand didn't often know whether the left hand has already submitted a form for something, and so we'd end up with 2 or maybe 3 in the process. And there were absolutely no KPIs. So one of the first things we were trying to do is establish with them when we were looking at a process and trying to map an as-is, we're asking, well, how long does this take? How many of them are there? And we would get nothing. There was no measurement. And it was very, very labor-intensive. So with all of that as a landscape, where would we start? So some of the key drivers for change and for the project existing was we wanted something that was very student and staff focused. We wanted to reduce overall bureaucracy in the organisation and standardise our processes as much as possible. With around 13 different faculties, you can guarantee that each of them was operating as their own business and doing things their own way. They might have the same start point and the same finish point, but the variation across that process was highly variable. So we wanted process visibility, we wanted the audit trail, we wanted KPIs, we wanted to be able to report on service levels, and we wanted to reduce operational costs. And that was one of the first things I would hear from the sponsor at the start of the project. We have to reduce costs. We're one of the most expensive universities to run in Australia, and we don't like that statistic. So we have to reduce costs. It's interesting how that conversation has changed over the year to not being just about costs, but about other things that became more important, like risk and compliance and benefits to staff and students. So we started in around October 2017, putting a business case together for going to market to select BPM tool and an RPA tool. We eventually awarded that contract in May 2018, and we started work sometime after that on our first process. We picked the HR appointments process at QUT for a number of reasons. Everyone told us, go for some low-hanging fruit, go for something easy to start with, don't do anything with integrations. Well, we ignored all that. So we really wanted something that could showcase what Appian could do in a rapid way, so that we could deliver value and really shine. And we wanted something that was enterprise-wide. And QUT Appointments was a really good case for that because it touched every single department and organisation in the organisation. We then went on to work on other applications like asset retirement. And in December 2018, we stopped being a project and became a business unit in our own right within the Division of Resources, working for the CIO. So that was a massive change for us as well. So, HR appointments before. So here's some statistics for you about QUT appointments. We handle around 6,500 to 7,000 contract extensions every year. This is for fixed-term, casual and academic professional appointments. We appoint about 3,000 permanent staff a year. So this is about replacing people that have left and new appointments to new roles. And we appoint 14,000 sessional academics every year as well. So that's at the beginning of every semester, we hire 7,000 sessional academics. That's to do things like take tutorials and do marking and so on. All of those forms were paper. Each one of those would be about 4 pages in length and would require an individual to go into multiple systems to find the data to put onto the form. Sometimes we'd have to go to the candidate themselves to confirm some of the data that needed to go onto that form. There was also privacy issues around it because we were asking people for their address and date of birth and things like that, which really the hiring manager didn't need to know. Once that paper form was filled in, they would have to sign it, scan it, and email it to the next person in the chain. On average, there were 5 approval steps for that form, so it had to be printed, scanned, and emailed on to the next person through that chain till eventually a contract got to your candidate for approval. So that could take up to 2 weeks, depending on how quickly people were looking at their email. Some deans of faculty would require their PA to print it off, put it on their desk on a file, and if they were out of the country, they didn't see it till they got back. So lots and lots of potential for time delays in that. And if in the meantime your candidate rang up and said, "Where's my contract at? You said you were going to appoint me. It's been 2 weeks," we had no way of knowing where it was. So people were keeping little local spreadsheets to try and track where these forms were and sending them out and insisting that they come back to them. So probably not surprising given some people's experience in the room. Perhaps it's very similar, but this was some of the things we were dealing with. There would be errors on the form, which often meant they had to be corrected. Duplicate forms, numerous systems that people had to use. And we estimated that for just the contract extensions, the process costs were about $600,000. So we implemented a BPM solution using Appian to create an online form and workflow. We integrated it with all of the systems so that it would pre-populate some of the data that we already knew. So if it was a contract extension, they were already a member of staff at QT. We didn't need to repeat that information. So we would just pre-populate the form with all of that information. And whoever was submitting the form for a contract just had to fill in the relevant details about the stuff that they knew, like which budget code it needed to come out of and so on. But then we would integrate that with Oracle as well so we could validate all of the data. So it was all pre-validated before it got submitted through. When that form arrives in payroll, because our payroll is such an old solution and has no modern APIs, we need to use RPA to enter that data into the payroll solution. So from an end-to-end process, hopefully there's minimal manual handling now. So now we have an online form. We have an audit trail. We know exactly where that form is, where it's up to, whose desk is it sitting on. So if I need to chase it up, if it's been on the CFO's desk for 2 days, I can ring his PA. She can push that through and make sure it happens. It's now compliant with policies and procedures, and there's no variation from that. You can't step outside of the policy and the procedure because the workflow drives you in that particular direction. The data is all validated. As I mentioned, the data is pre-populated. We're integrating with other systems in order to be able to do that. The robot's replacing the manual data entry. And new to us, we've managed now to allow an appointee to accept contract online. So we don't have to print it out and sign it their end either and then scan it back in and then HR update anything. It all just happens online. So the benefits to us as a business, we're estimating about 50% cost saving overall in the time saved. Our cycle time, so that's the time from the form being submitted to an employee accepting a contract, has been reduced by 86%. In 35% of cases so far, the day that we submit the form, it goes through the cycle and they accept the contract. So 35% of it's actually happening in 1 day now, which is amazing and unheard of. We've reduced printing by over 200,000 pages a year, which is incredible. All of our sessional academics, and so this is one of the really big gotchas with RPA. Previously, there's about 6 people in the payroll team. When we hire our sessional academics, it's all got to be done within a 2, 3, 4 week period. So that's 7,000 appointments in a very short space of time. They used to have to pay overtime. They used to have to bring in casual appointees in order to help them with all the data entry, as well as doing all the validation on the forms. The robot does it all now. And that team's absolutely amazed. Now, the interesting thing about that is credit a problem elsewhere. So in building the RPA, we had to put in around 30 different business rules to handle those forms and the corrections and validations that we needed to do. So they now go into an exception queue for the payroll team to handle. So they're now they've got time on their hands now, so they're picking this up and enforcing the rules and going back to faculty and going, you can't do this. And they go, well, you never told us we couldn't do this, and you've never enforced it before. No, but we can now. So that created a whole different mess, which we had to deal with. And they were going, it's the robot's fault. And I go, it's not the robot's fault, it's the business rules. Change the business rules and the robot will just do what you tell it to do. And we now have a higher degree of privacy. So when I'm hiring somebody in the system now, I don't have to put any of their personal data in. When the form goes to you to accept a contract, you can update that information yourself. It's your data. I don't need to see it. Payroll system needs it, but I don't as a hiring manager. In terms of fabulous feedback from users, so when we did our first sprint, we did our first showcase at the end of the sprint to most of the HR team, the director of HR. And to be honest, they probably weren't expecting to see an awful lot at the first showcase. We'd only been developing for 2 weeks. We were able to show them almost a third of the solution, so the entire form, with already some of the pre-population of the person's data. So when I put somebody's name in, if they're already a staff member, it would pop up with a list and go, do you mean this person? And you click on it and you go through to the next page. At the end of that session, they were all kind of like, you did that in 2 weeks? Really? Wow, it's amazing. And so that interaction and that ongoing feedback from clients was really, really special. Another great piece of feedback that we had was, of course, we went live with a pilot group first and started to grow it out from there across the enterprise. We noticed that one admin person had put in around 70 forms, so she submitted 70 forms in one day. So we rang her up and we said, how was your experience? What did you think? And she said, oh my God, this is amazing. It used to take me up to an hour and a half per form to collect all the data together from the different systems, maybe go to the candidate and ask them for some extra information to finish the form, or check with finance. I had to email finance, which budget do I put this in, and so on. And she said, so that would have been 13 days worth of work for those 70 forms. She said, I did them all in a day. It's great. I love it. Can we have more, please? So where to next? So we've got quite a pipeline of work. We've probably delivered about 8 applications now, and we are rapidly adding more and more. We have a prioritisation process, so we're getting lots of ideas coming in from different parts of the business. We've been mainly focusing on corporate solutions up until now, but we're starting to look at branching out into some student services. One of the most exciting things for us is that our HiQ, which is our call centre at QT, so that handles staff and student inquiries. We've got a 38-seat contact centre. They wanted to go to market recently for some AI to help them on their knowledge articles, and they're also swamped with calls. I think they've got something like a 68% dropout rate, so people who are waiting on the phone and give up and put the phone down because they just can't get through to anybody. So our service levels are really, really poor, and it's affecting getting students through the door in that first semester of the year. So that's really, really crucial. So they wanted a contact management centre solution, and they were going to market. And procurement said, oh, you should go and speak to the BPIO team, see what they can do for you. So they came to talk to us, and then they said, would you mind putting in a proposal? So I said, sure. So I just wrote them a letter. It wasn't, I've worked in professional services and I've done proposals before, and I thought, well, I'm not going to town on this because we don't stand a chance against any of the big players. So I'll just put a letter in about what we can do and how we work and what we can deliver for them. And we won it. So we will be working with them over the next 6 months to try and deliver a contact management solution for them, which we're going to build and integrate with all the different systems. And the director of HiQ said to me, is there any chance we could have maybe a prototype by January next year? And I went, sure. Well, I think we'll try and manage that. But I think we'll probably have something a lot quicker. So that's my presentation.